Hey, welcome to the Formidable podcast. This is a podcast for communicators, entrepreneurs, business leaders, and anyone with a passion for improving the way they build relationships with their audiences. My name's Amaya Daly, and I am the founder of Formidable Public Relations, which is a PR agency here in Canada, and I'll be your host for today's discussion about what the hell is PR. So my much more social business partner, Savannah, is constantly dragging me out to networking events, and it feels like this continuous Groundhog Day of interactions and introductions. And it always goes something like this. Hey, I'm Amaya. And they go, wow, nice to meet you, Amaya. What do you do for work? I say, I own a PR agency. And without a doubt, it always ends with, oh, what does that mean? I thought after years of working in the PR industry and owning a PR agency that I would come up with that perfect elevator pitch to answer that question of what is PR. And I would be lying if I said that I had the perfect answer. Our job as PR specialists is so vast and ever-changing that I struggle with coming up with that perfect boilerplate of what we do day in and day out. Some days we're helping organizations through big changes and coming up with strategic ways to tell their staff and stakeholders about what's going on. The next day we're helping a city refine their brand story and come up with their style guide to make sure that everyone is communicating about them in the same way. Here at Formidable PR, we have our hands in so many things that I feel like it would take half an hour to explain to these new networking friends exactly what we do. And this is the big reason why I struggle with explaining exactly what PR is, because we do so much and it is so many things. But to help me try to answer that question for you, I have brought in one of our greatest team members here at Formidable PR, Mikiko Van Horn. She's a PR specialist who is one of the most genuinely compassionate people that I know, and she brings ethics and empathy into all of her PR efforts. And so, without further ado, let's jump into that conversation.
I think I've ever met someone who has worked in PR as like that is the only thing they've done their entire lives, have not come in from journalism or some other industry, which makes public relations such an eclectic group of people, or such an eclectic field. But I think that's also why you get these questions of what is PR? What is it you do? Amaya, what's your job? What do you do?
And that's the thing, like half the time I don't even know how to answer that.
Yep.
I'm like, what day?
Whenever
What am I doing today?
whenever I'm asked to introduce myself, so a new employee onboarding or whatever it is, and people are like, oh, give me the short of your job. I mean, either I can go for the very dry one line of, like it's ethical two-way communications between a organization and its stakeholders and public, or you go the like, oh, some of everything. How do you feel about media relations, also communications plans, marketing, digital, like it's everything, right?
I think that's a good segue into let's look at what's the actual definition from the Canadian PR Society of what PR is. So they say public relations is the strategic management of relationships between an organization and its diverse publics through the use of communication to achieve mutual understanding, realize organizational goals, and serve the public interest.
I mean, that's certainly aspirational.
And
from the 2008.
so when you hear a definition like that, like what does that say to you? Like how does that actually reflect in what you do day to day working as a PR professional?
I mean, reputation management. That's at least the first thing I think about, because when you are managing your relationship between yourself or your clients or your organization and external parties, that's a huge part of it. How are you being perceived? How are people telling you that they're perceiving you? And what actions are you doing in order to enforce this or to, I don't know, change it? I think that's the number one thing. And it includes so many activities under that, but
I kind of get stuck on that like mutually beneficial relationship piece, and like it sounds, I don't know, a little airy fairy.
I feel like mutually beneficial is, I feel like when that quote was written, it was at a point in time where you didn't want to explicitly say things like, oh, the ethical or the transparent or all those different things. Whereas now, when we're looking at trends in marketing and trends in consumer behaviors and trends, also just in internal behaviors with your own internal stakeholders, transparency and honesty is becoming increasingly more important. People want to know who you are, whereas before people didn't necessarily care too much about who you were, but they cared about what they were getting from you. So mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I think that kind of leans to perhaps we need a new definition, seeing as that one's from 2008. And I mean, how much has changed since then? I mean, I think even the birth of social media, right? And that way where you can actually have a mutually beneficial relationship and open communication and feedback with your public is at your fingertips all day, every day, opposed to, you know, back in the day where, I mean, you had to actually push out ways to talk to your public, to your audience.
Totally. I think one piece that has a good amount of staying power from that definition, at least, is the strategic aspect, and I think that's a very, very important part of all public relations activities. It's thinking about the ends, and how you're getting there. It's not just getting to your end goal. It's what are you doing to get to your end goal? Is it still in alignment with your organizational values? Is it in alignment with your future activities? Because it's not enough to execute one project and then walk away from it entirely. You really do have to think about the interconnectedness of all of your public relations activities.
So at its core, like what would you say PR is?
I'm going to end up quoting that one-liner, aren't I, that I have to use at networking events. Well, I mean, I aid and assist in strategically managing relationships between an organization and its public. That's usually that's my line. That's what I use.
And then you get the head nods.
Oh, that's so nice.
I think when people ask me about PR, what does that look like? Like, what do I do? What does our company do? They automatically go to that publicist work. You know, like what you would think in Hollywood, what you see on TV. Like, all we do is plan events and we do book launches and follow celebrities around and solve all of their, or at least hide
Their crises.
all the crap they've been doing, and I think that is so far from what we do daily, that it's kind of funny to try to explain to someone who has that vision, you know, the Samantha Jones or like Olivia Pope's or whatever Hollywood type image they have in their mind, to like actually bring it to like what we're doing day in and day out.
Not to say that publicist work isn't an aspect of public relations. It certainly is a part of it, in the same way that digital strategies and digital media and digital ads, it really has become, especially as communications channels have evolved and changed and grown, the PR field has grown to include more and more and more, which sometimes can make it difficult, I think, to differentiate what a public relations practitioner is versus a marketer versus someone who is very much entrenched in social media.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into that, because I think when PR perhaps was fresh and new, whenever that was, that, you know, there were like really solid lines between PR work, which maybe meant, you know, media outreach and dealing with crisis and trying to manage a reputation for your client or for an organization. And then you had marketing, your advertising, like, you know, that advertisement piece of it and that sales aspect, right? And then, of course, always like, you know, journalism. And I'm sure there's many other pieces and, you know, roles with throughout the field that involved in that, but I feel like there's not really any like dividing lines between that anymore. And how do you feel like PR, like kind of like just transcends all of those aspects.
I think that it has evolved into that when you are working with a fresh public relations practitioner. Generally speaking, the foundational knowledge is very firmly seated in storytelling. It's in fact gathering. It's in key message building. What is the core of what you need to say? Which I think also speaks to the history of public relations too, where originally it had a little bit more to do with crisis management and like, how do I put this cat back in the bag? As well as how do I ensure that more people think that I am this image that I want to project over anything else. Some aspects of that I think are still very much what we go out with as public relations practitioners. When I left school, I certainly felt much more confident in, hey, like I feel really, really confident in putting together my key messages and ensuring that if we need to talk to the public or the media about this, I know what to say. And I can do that by building off of what my organizational values are, as well as what people are ready to hear and also are receptive to hearing as well. With a core of ethics. I feel like that's another thing, at least for me, I will circle a lot around the idea of ethics and communication and what is ethical, what is moral to communicate at this time, because we're seeing quite a lot of extremism in ideologies, beliefs, all those different things, and it affects business practices. And through that too, the idea of, well, we have this product, we're finding out that it's actually, it's going to turn your hair blue, but we're just going to say like, well, it has a risk of turning your hair green, sometimes blue, maybe. I mean, that's another big part of it too. Good public relations is not spin doctoring, and that is something that I think even now people really lean into that. They're looking at, oh, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. How do I at least make it a good-looking cat? And that's not really what good PR is. It's not manipulation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we, as PR practitioners, especially like within the company, we've been asked, and I've sat in meetings where people are like, "Can you put the positive spin on that?" I'm like, "No, I can put the truthful spin on that. Like, what actually happened? Like, what do you want to say? Like, there are points, and I don't think we want to get into like the crisis aspect of it. We're just trying to talk about PR in like broad strokes, but sometimes you just got to own up to the shit you did and say you're sorry, right? And I'm not gonna spin that. I'm not gonna help you spin that in any way. So I think if the industry is leaning away from that and the spin doctor ideology is leaving, like, thank God, because I don't know anybody, new age anybody working in PR, that's what they want to do, or that's how they want to help represent a company. I feel like that's a very old school way to approach PR.
Absolutely. And I think it's also a way of looking at yourselves, or at least that aspect is looking at individuals as a one-time transaction where you have a one-time sale because you got what you want from them and you don't have to worry about the relationship anymore. Because the thing is, if you're worrying, or if you are invested in a relationship, whatever level that is, you want to take care of the relationship in a way that it's sustainable. And spin doctoring, being manipulative with your messaging, not being transparent, these are all ways that essentially can manage a relationship, but will burn the individual out. At some point, people are smart. They'll catch on, they'll notice that things aren't exactly as you originally were advertising or pushing out as a message, and you lose your reputation, you lose faith in an organization, or they lose faith in you. Yeah. Absolutely. You were talking before about how it's such a broad industry and it includes a little bit of everything. And now I would say that the opposite is true too. If you're a marketer, you do still need to have some understanding of PR and how to get out there and things like that. Do you feel like you can just, do you need a dedicated individual who has a PR background in order to do efficient PR? Or can you just go with any kind of a generalist?
And I mean, like, that's a great question. I think it really would depend on what your goal is, right? If you are trying to push out an idea, bring awareness around something, sell a product, of course, like a marketer, of course, is probably going to be able to get you there. I think when you're doing a deeper dive into who that audience is, and like you've been saying, actually building a long-term sustainable like relationship with them, I think a PR professional is somebody that you would want on your team, right? Somebody who can help you look at that lifespan of not just, attracting a client or, a champion of your initiative, whatever that might be, but to have somebody who wants to stick around with you, because we all know the people who are staying there are like that loyalty, like that I don't know. I don't think you can put a cost on that at all. And that doesn't matter if you're an organization who's looking for, let's say, board of directors who give a shit and want to do good work, or you are trying to sell the widget, right? Like, I think having that ongoing relationship is so key. And I think you do need to put, PR practices into developing those kinds of mutually beneficial relationships, right?
Yeah.
To quote
Going
CPRS,
full
yeah.
circle,
Yeah, exactly.
It's sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting that you say that, because I think that there is also a very large perception that as we lean further and further into a global market where there's so many individuals to choose from, how much time and effort should you put into investing in an individual brand and those individual people who are your target market when there are so many to pick from, and you can just do a one-time transaction, your organization will still survive, right? It's interesting. I really do believe that, at least from my experience, you can lean into the one-time transactions. You can survive for a time that way, but your reputation is worth so much more than a one-time transaction, than than $20 in the bank that you can put towards your organization. It's so much more than that, because it's word of mouth. It's other individuals who have aligned values wanting to invest in who you are and see you go further.
Yeah, and I think touching on that amount of competition, I would argue, like, how can you not build that relationship with your client? If there's 100 other companies out there like you, what's that meaningful piece that you're building to pull them in and keep them invested in you?
This part of the conversation is reminding me of that recent, I would say, publicity stunt more than PR. The recent publicity stunt that Shine did with several different influencers over social media. Did you hear about that? So not too long ago, Shine, which is a fast fashion brand out of China, I believe. Yes, it's out of China. They they paid for a bunch of influencers to come out to a factory and to see how amazing it was and look at all of this great stuff we do. Actually, we're really ethical. We care a lot about people. We care a lot about the product we're creating. And we had all these influencers coming back trying to spread the good word of Shine and their reputation. Well, up until that point of trying to find dedicated individuals, they already showed who they were. They engaged in fast fashion practices. They engaged in basically consumer theft or corporate theft. Like, they still steal many designs from small artists and small businesses and reproduce it. And they have, there's investigations ongoing into their business practices because they're not looking to be ethical. They're looking to make fast dollars, fast transactions, right? So even though they went to try and do this PR or publicity stunt, I really don't think it counts as public relations at this point. Even though they invested quite a lot of money in this, and I think they even mocked up places for people to visit. I should probably fact check that before I even really lean into it, but that was my understanding. Anyways, by the point that they actually started to care about doing this, they'd already flushed their reputation down the toilet because they were much more interested in revenue than the actual individuals they were selling and buying from.
And that comes back to not only your points of being ethical, but the transparency behind it, right? You can't, in the way that you were saying that, like, people are smart and you have the world's worth of information literally in your pocket now. Like, they will find out. It's not that challenging to find out when you aren't being truthful. So I mean, I think that publicity stunts such as that, just like it doesn't serve you, right? It doesn't help you get your company where you need to, and actually will probably hinder your reputation.
Totally. And I think it also ties into another very old saying about PR that I firmly don't believe is relevant anymore. All PR is good PR, or all media attention is good media attention. That's not true.
I would like to argue that that probably was never true. Like I don't know how that having that negative perception of your company out there was worth that, and worth that saying. I think that was probably like some kind of like madman bullshit that was like cooked up so that like when your PR company screwed up, they're like, but
We're still
it's
in
okay.
the papers. And I straight up think that the mindset behind that is in a pre-social media, even pre-internet world, where brand awareness is really challenging because there are limited channels to access individuals. The idea that, oh, well, we're still in the paper today.
And we didn't have to pay for it because that was the only way, right? Like the gatekeeper was the news, the magazines, whatever. You had to pay, or you had to have a really good story to get in there. But I mean, that also leans into the back in the day when you only got paid based on how much ad space or how much real estate in the newspaper you got your client, which is absurd. Yeah. Stay tuned for another episode. But so going back to how PR kind of fits into so many different places in the industry. How do you feel PR professionals, generally communications people, whether that's corporate communications, marketers, people who work in advertising, journalists, like how can we all work together in our respective fields, support each other, and help that common goal of propelling forward the message of an organization or of a company?
I mean, I feel like it happens very naturally. People lean into the parts of work that they either feel the most confident or practiced in. For public relations, or however your training was, I know that my training at least had quite a bit to do with storytelling, writing. How are we telling our story through the media, through magazine articles, all those different pieces, and aligning that to what other people working in communications are looking to achieve. So with journalism, if you're looking to share important information, if you're looking to, I guess that's the main point of journalism, isn't it?
Well, one would hope that you're looking to share truthful, relevant information.
Well, when I think of when I work with journalist contacts that I have, I always think about like, well, what makes this worth your time more than anything else that any other organization that I'm working with or that is out there taking up market real estate? Like, what is unique about this, and what is really worthy of ultimately the reader, the public? So that's at least how I kind of fit it. Like I just have to step out of myself to think about these individuals I'm working with. So if I'm working with a digital marketer, or if I'm working with someone who is basically just a full-time storyteller or journalist, I really do think about what is in it for them? What are they looking to do? And how does that relate to the work that I'm trying to do?
I feel too that like there's so much we can learn from each other, and with those different avenues blurring their lines. I mean, I know that we have background here in marketing, and I've used a lot of marketing tactics in PR. And that idea of like, you're just trying to get that like conversion and trying to get people to buy in even to an idea, right? You're not necessarily selling anything. You're selling whether it's an initiative or whatever we're doing, a project that we're helping spread the awareness on, we'll use marketing tactics to try to lure the people in to even just care enough to read further about this, this piece of work that probably pertains to them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think there's a lot that we can like learn from each other and support in that. And I would argue too, like the marketing side, if you can better understand what your audience is looking for and trying to build that relationship, that's where you get that like ongoing champion, repeat customer, the loyalty piece of it.
PR fits effectively in any kind of marketing team, any kind of internal communications team. It's so necessary to have someone who has the management of those relationships between different stakeholders at the front of their mind at all times. Like I don't feel like it's a nice to have. I feel like it's a need to have, and obviously I'm biased. I have a very clear bias here, but if you ever find yourself in that situation where you want to build a meaningful relationship with your target audiences, you need someone who has a PR background to do that. You can get relatively far without one, but then something goes sideways, and boy, do you wish that you had someone 6 steps back guiding you along the way to really help hone the messaging that you're putting out there, right? So that's my 2 cents on that, at least. Very biased 2 cents.
We're okay. Explicit bias.
Minted in the Formidable PR factory.
Okay, so now that we've talked about this entire time, talking about strategic, mutually beneficial relationships, we've talked about, how PR fits into other aspects of your organization and team members. If we're going to bring this back, and we've decided that it is all about building better relationships with your audience, what is something that you could do tomorrow to start building that better relationship with your stakeholders and with your audience?
My opinion or my advice here would be to bring it back to your company values and ensure that the messaging that you're putting out aligns with those values in a way that is honest and transparent. Could you be more clear with what your goals are, with what your expectations of your stakeholders are? Those things are really, really important. I think a lot of organizations, they really do believe in their employees. They believe in taking care of one another. A lot of groups are like that. And if that's something that your organization takes quite seriously, look at that and then look at your messaging, because oftentimes things like that don't make it all the way. People often, it gets lost, especially with sales, when you're thinking about, well, we just need to get conversion at the end of the day. We need to have a certain revenue goal that we achieve every day. But it's such an easy fix. Look again at your key messaging. Look at what you're saying about yourself and where you're putting it. Does this all align, and is it honest? Can people understand what you're saying about yourself?
Okay, I think that's a great takeaway. And for myself, I would argue to anybody who wants to build a better relationship with their stakeholders is to listen to what they want. If you want to have a strong relationship with somebody, you need to know what they want back from you. And there's lots of ways to check in with your audience. We hear about social listening all the time, and what does that look like? How can you actually see the comments and the feedback that you are getting from your key audience? And ensure that you are providing them, whether that's the information or the services, what they need from you. When it comes to something like a corporation or a company and you're looking at internal communications, what do your staff want? And let me tell you, it's not a pizza party, right? So what does your staff want from you? So if you want to build a better relationship, you need to listen, you need to find out what that group of people wants, and then you need to figure out how you can achieve that, right? And maybe you can't do the raises for everybody, but what can you do to try and get to that goal of what your stakeholder is expecting from you?
I love that. That's great advice.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of the Formidable podcast. At the end, we did ask you, what are you going to do today to build a better relationship with your audience? So let us know. Comment below. We'd love to hear your ideas. If you want to connect further with our team, you can find us on all the socials, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications when the next episodes come out. You can listen to us on any podcast streaming service and, of course, on YouTube. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
I just realized that I've been saying shine this entire time. It might be Shein. Shin.
None of us know how to say it.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm very sorry.